These are the people who inspire me to be more fully me, not in spite of my trials, but because of them. Let's hear from another hero. Today's topic includes sensitive material which may not be appropriate for children. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as advice. The opinions expressed here were strictly those of the person who gave them. Today we're going to talk with Alicia Harris. She has many roles in her life: daughter, sister, lover of all humans, narcolept, and more. We'll talk about how she couldn't figure out as a teenager, yes, that's before cell phones, her parents always seemed to know where she was, the distorted feeling of being asleep yet awake, and how narcolepsy is a superpower to her. Let's talk. Hey, Alicia, welcome to Relatively Damaged.
Well, thank you. Good to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. So we're here to talk about struggles and how to overcome them. And what struggle would you like to share with the audience today?
Well, it was interesting when you and I were talking about that before the show about struggles in general and what gotten. As I sat there and thought about them, I went back and forth on which one, as well as what I actually should probably consider a struggle, which was an interesting thing. So, because some of my struggles are my strengths now. And so I kind of tossed it around and I thought, well, maybe, so I picked one of those. I picked one of those to talk about. A pretty big one for a teenager to go through back when I was a teenager. I come from a family of 6 kids. So I have a large family. I'm the third. And my mom said that growing up, I was so easy that she actually had to make time and remind herself to go play with me when I was a toddler because I was content. I was content. I watched the world. I was content. And so she actually had to do that. So picture that kid. Okay, the one watching the world and happy creating whatever I was creating. She said you could give me some scissors and a magazine and I'd be happy for hours cutting and collaging. And that was the kid I was. And then I hit about 13 and I started to hallucinate. And when you're a 13-year-old going through everything you're going through, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm seeing stuff no one else is. And realizing no one else is, trying to explain that to your parents, right, who are also seeing a 13-year-old daughter look different than she used to because I dyed my hair blue, black, all these fun things. So they're seeing all that. And at the same time, it all happened right around the time, I don't know if you recall, when they had the big push on TV for, is your kid doing drugs? Do you remember that ad campaign?
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. So I am showing pretty much every sign that they list in those commercials, right? I knew I wasn't, and I knew something was up. But my parents, poor things, now I say poor things. At the time, you expect your parents to know everything and do everything, right? And I think that is one of the key things with this whole story that I wish had happened differently was having a parent actually communicate to their kid that they don't know everything. I think it's important to have a parent be strong. You need that to feel like you can go to them, but you also don't feel like you can go to them if they're not human. Does that make sense?
I think what I hear you saying is that your parents were supposed to know everything, and because they believed they needed to know everything, they couldn't come to you and say, we're not certain what's going on. So, and then
it's like they were trying to also hold together the image of the strong parent, right? My mom has talked to me extensively about this 20 years after it happened, kind of a thing. We've had lots of conversations. So now I know her viewpoint. But at the time, I didn't know that, right? And I think that's one thing that I got out of all of this largely is the communication skills between a parent and a child and what they should and shouldn't be.
Hmm.
And that's the thing my mom says she regrets the most too, was wishing she had actually said what was going on in her head instead of not. And then I'm like, I'm this kid trying to guess. But here's the thing. So I started having, they call them seizures, but that sounds a little more dramatic perhaps than mine would. I would seize up, it's called cataplexy. And what it is it actually causes your body to seize, but you don't shake. It's not like epilepsy. To everybody else, it looks like you're sleeping.
Okay.
You know you're not. You can still hear everything going on. It's a weird, warped version of it, but you can hear people talking. You know they think you're asleep, and you're desperately trying to let them know you're not. It's a very weird physical state to be in. And so I had that, those, I called them my episodes, started to happen. And they coincided with narcolepsy, which is actually what I have. And
so you have two things going on.
Two things going on at the same time. Cataplexy went away, thankfully, after about a year and a half, went away, it's gone. Narcolepsy, still have, I will always have that. That is reality. I don't know what it would be like to not take medicine throughout the whole day. That's what I do.
So narcolepsy is where you just fall asleep out of nowhere, right? Like it's a surprising.
Yes. It's not that simple, but yes. I wish it was that simple. It's not as simply as sleep. Narcolepsy affects a number of other things too. For example, it kicks in when you're having strong emotions, which means laughter as well as crying hard. And when I say it kicks in, what it does is, for me, I have a mild case, fortunately, compared, that's what I'm told. I have never ever met another person with narcolepsy, so I don't know. It's rare. That's what I'm told, is I have a mild case. But like when I laugh hard, my muscles in my neck and head, my head will drop forward because I can't hold up. My muscles relax. It's part of narcolepsy. When you're sleeping, your muscles are relaxed. So that will happen. And it's very frustrating. And I get what I call my bedroom eyes, but they're my droopy eyes. And people, again, my poor parents, thinking I'm on something, right? Because my eyes look like they're on drugs. So I have that going for me. I've got all these things going. The incredible blessing was that one time my mom saw me go in, because I was trying to explain it to them, but they didn't see the cataplexy. She saw me go into cataplexy, and I shaked a little bit that time, just little tremors, and then she knew like legitimately something was up. So very fortunately, the neurologist, I lived in Wyoming at the time, the neurologist, my little tiny town, his side interest happened to be narcolepsy. Talk about a blessing. Nobody's side interests are narcolepsy. So he was doing all these other tests, because normally narcolepts don't get diagnosed for years a lot of times, because our symptoms are so much like a bunch of other things. And they try and rule out the more severe things first.
Okay.
So usually you don't get diagnosed. He actually said to my parents, hey, your insurance won't cover this, but I really want to run a DNA test and look for this one really weird gene that I think your daughter has.
Right.
And so my parents said, do it. And so they found it. So I actually have the gene, and doctors think that's exciting. Whenever a doctor reads my charts, they're like, oh, you're a real narcolept. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, but sure.
Oh,
so
wow.
Going through all of that became a very kind of angry at my parents. I was not angry at anyone else, angry at my parents, kind of a teenager. I was really horrible to my parents.
So were you angry finding out, or were you more angry because you didn't feel heard or understood? Like what?
Yes.
What was it? Which?
Yes to everything. But no, truthfully, I think it was because I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel listened to. And then on top of that, it's a strange thing when you know you're different and you want it to be acknowledged, but at the same time, you don't want to be treated differently, but you kind of do. Yeah, it's this weird back and forth. And I felt like my parents, I didn't have the energy other kids had. I couldn't do the things other kids did, as far as no one else knew. I was very good. No one can tell usually.
Right.
Okay, until my eyes start to do their thing, and then I explain it to the person because I don't want them to think I'm on drugs. But usually, other than that, you can't really tell, right? And so I think that's one of the things. I feel a lot of us have a lot of things that other people can't tell, but it's going on, and it's different. So you react in ways like that assumes everyone knows. It's kind of a funny thing. And, especially, teenagers, I don't think are given credit. I'll be honest, for thinking as much as they think. And
explain that a little bit.
You bet. I really believe that teenagers are smarter than a lot of us give them credit for being. And at the same time, in hindsight, they're smarter in their world. And
right.
That's a reality, right? And, you always want to say, I can't wait till you get to college and see there's a bigger world, because you're in your high school world. Yeah. And that really is legitimately your world. But regardless of that, that is their world. And you need to treat it as significantly as you would treat your world, right? And I think that doesn't happen. I feel a lot of times adults talk to teenagers like, someday you'll get it. Someday you'll get it. They do get it. They get their reality right now. And the emotions are just as legit and just as strong as yours are. And treating it like someday you'll get it when you hit the real world, I think is just a big mistake. And I think a lot of teenagers don't get the help or don't get the validation perhaps that they need, because we treat it like someday they'll understand. Someday they'll understand a different version, right? But their version's totally real, and it needs to be addressed as totally real. Does that make sense a little bit?
It totally makes so much sense that their experience is real.
Absolutely.
And that their emotions are real. And because you brought up emotions, what I'm hoping you can do is maybe explain what some of those, you're a teenager, you're finding out you've got cataplexy, you're a narcolept, it sounds like maybe there were some differences. What were the emotions that you felt? And when you talk about those emotions, what did they physically feel like inside of you?
That's a very good question. That's a really good question. It's hard to answer.
I'm sorry.
No, that's totally a good question. How did emotions feel? There was a lot of big swings. So from being super happy to being super depressed. And I think feeling like nobody is like you at all. And that is like gut wrenching, literally, when you talk about physically how it feels, that is really painful. But on the flip side, I had such great friends, and I had a lot of fun. So it wasn't like this deep, dark high school career. I actually had a lot of fun, probably too much fun. I would leave school a lot, and we had an open campus. And so, we would leave school and go and hang out and do different things. I did graduate even with honors, so I managed to pull it off. but we had a lot of fun. So I did have really good times, but it was just weird. The weird thing was too, is that at that time, especially in high school, I'd see other kids, at least in my high school, acid was a big thing back then. And apparently Coke, but I didn't know that. So I was told that years later, well, so-and-so did whatever. And I'm like, really? But what I did see was people trying to alter themselves when I was trying to be normal. And that's a weird thing. Like I would be very frustrated because they would be trying to alter their brain when I was trying to not see things.
Oh, wow.
So that's the kind of weird thing. Although I had a lot of them say they wished that they had my narcolepsy so they didn't have to do the drugs. And I was like, yeah, it's not really how it works, but there you go. Yeah, so it's a weird reality there.
Yeah, it sounds... Okay, so the weird part of the reality is that, number one, like you were saying, people are trying to do to their brain what yours was doing normally. And that does not make sense, right? Because it wasn't fun for you.
Exactly.
And then on the other side, you're talking about a lot of fun. So what was it about leaving campus and going with your friends that maybe that, did that have anything to do with feeling different at school? I don't know.
I think it's more truthfully partly just about having control.
Okay.
I really do think a lot of it comes down to that, because when you don't have control over what your body does, you like to have control over your life. So I felt like me being able to leave campus and go do what I wanted to do was me controlling what I got to do. Instead of having, the school tell me what I had to do.
Because you already lost control with your body.
Exactly.
So what can you control?
What can you control? I think that's why I had all the fun hair colors, I'll be honest. I could control that. I had every kind of color you could imagine. It was fun. And I still find myself doing that. When I'm frustrated, I go get a haircut because I can control that. It's kind of a funny thing how that works.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's actually a healthy thing now. It's not, and I actually think it always was, truthfully.
It was healthy to find something to do.
Right.
Or change that you had control over.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, and keep in mind during all of this, the only people who were getting the bad deal of my personality were my parents. I was very kind to everybody else. Nobody else would have any idea what a brat I was if you weren't in my household.
Oof.
So other adults had no clue. I got away with leaving campus because I was the good student, right? And so teachers weren't upset. They would just be like, I aced the test. It's okay. She's not here today.
Right.
Kind of a thing. And I was a good kid and I did think a lot, and actually, can we talk about that for a moment, that thinking thing?
I was actually going to ask, so yes, please.
I had a very interesting experience. Of course, my poor parents trying to figure out what to do with me, right? And so we all went to a family therapist once. I totally remember this. We go to this family therapist, and after our session, dragging all 6 kids and me, right? Yeah, I'm there too, right? He says, no one else needs to come back but Alicia, okay? Needless to say, that doesn't make you feel warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, what was that feeling? Were you mad, sad, angry?
At that point, I was like, whatever. I was sarcastic, knew this would happen, fine. And so I went back to that guy by myself, okay? And actually, one of the best things by far for me with a few sessions, I only did it a few times, were with this guy. He was really key. At the time, I didn't realize that in hindsight, he was priceless, actually. One, he taught me self-meditation so that when my episodes, as I call them, were going to come on, he taught me, because I could tell when they were going to. I can feel it. My body feels different. I know something's going to happen, so I can sit down. I can do things like that, which is where I'm blessed, whether narcolepsy, they might just collapse. I don't. I can tell when it's coming on. And so he taught me how to self-hypnotize so that I could go to a happy place while my body did whatever. So priceless, right? Yeah. I learned how to, I actually created myself a dance club. And that's where I would go in my mind when that was happening, so I didn't have to deal with any of the scary hallucinations or feeling out of control. So that was priceless.
Yeah.
But the moment I think really hit with him was probably, I don't know, our third, fourth session. So I had a little bit of trust built up with him, right?
Uh-huh.
And he just said, he said, people don't see the world the same way you do. And I just said, I was like, well, what are you talking about? And he goes, you see all these things about people and about emotions that the people have. And so then you can't understand, why would somebody treat somebody differently if they knew this? And he's like, they don't know that. And that was like a big what? And so he's like, they don't see that. And he's like, you have a different insight. And excuse me, I got a little emotional on that one.
It's okay.
But it was interesting in that I realized, guess what? We don't all see the world the same way. And truthfully, my 15-year-old mind, I think at the time, didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you realize not everybody has the same understanding, it makes a big difference, right? You get that people, like, it's okay. It's not as absurd. You're like, I get it. And now, actually, I think that is such a humongous blessing that we're not all the same. What a boring world. Like, sincerely, how boring would it be if we were all the same? Our strength is that we aren't. And we're not supposed to all think the same way. We wouldn't be necessary if we did.
Mm-hmm.
And, realizing that was like this big aha moment where I was like, what do you mean they don't all understand this? And he's like, once you realize that everyone doesn't see things the same way, you won't be upset at what they're doing. You'll understand what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's pretty priceless, and it's like, all right. And then the other thing he said, which may help some people, because I've thought about this, is he said that, and he may have just said this to make me feel good, but he said the smartest people he's ever met are the people who have come to him for therapy. And he said people with a high intelligence and people who are smart or just observant, he said, need therapists because they don't understand why the world does the absurd things it does.
Mm. So because the world does, or people do absurd things, maybe some of the people who go to therapy or need to go are the ones that recognize that the most.
That's what he felt. He felt that people who actually observe things and see more end up needing therapy because they don't understand why people could act the way they do, knowing what they know. And that's what he was explaining, is they don't know what you know. And once you realize that, you're like, oh, I get it. Okay. So what they just did wasn't actually so cruel or stupid. They didn't understand.
Right.
And he said that that's why he felt a lot of really observant or intelligent is the word he used. People need therapy because they see the world and don't understand why people would do things that they're doing given what's going on.
Yeah.
How their perception of it. And that makes a big difference. And that is a key thing now I've learned in my life in general. Like, when somebody doesn't hold your view, that's not a bad thing. You have no idea what they've been through. You have no idea their perception. And even then, it doesn't matter. Your perception actually may not be the best one. When you do realize other people's point of views, you're like, oh, I get it. And hopefully you can get something from it too, right?
So how do you stay open to other people's perspectives? Because that's what I think I hear you talking about is you see this world and you have this knowledge, and sometimes I'm sure you feel like you have the answer or you're right.
Right.
Now, when you're in that situation, how do you stay open to someone else?
I really feel that it's a matter of, first it has to be conscious, truthfully. You do have, it's not like it's just this all being, wonderful, smooth thing I have figured out. No, you got to be aware of it, especially, I think I actually try really hard when somebody does have a different opinion of me to kick myself into the mode of not judging, because it's quick and easy to judge. And I think it's important to judge, though, at the same time. But you don't judge the person, you need to judge the situation. That is a safety mechanism to keep ourselves safe as well. But you need to listen to the person, right? And I feel like what I remind myself is that we are actually way more alike than we are different. Okay? And it goes back to, we have all felt the same feelings. Different things have caused them. Mm-hmm. Different experiences have caused them, but the feeling is the same. And when you realize that that person does know how to feel joy, that person has felt hurt, it makes you realize they're more like you, not less like you. Different things caused it, but the feelings were absolutely the same. Going back to that teenager saying how the teenager's world, and sometimes they get dismissed because they're in their world, right? But their emotion is just as legitimate as yours. Mm-hmm. And is just as real. And I feel like the rest of the world is absolutely that way too. Mm-hmm. And you need to respect that emotion and realize that they are more like you than you think.
So what do you do when maybe someone offends you? How do you, because I think what I hear you kind of describing is staying curious about what's happening.
Yeah.
But how do you transition or remind, let's say somebody offends you, so you catch yourself, because it sounds like that's a little bit of what you're talking about. All of a sudden,
right,
you have to get present again. Now that you're present, what's your next step?
I'll be honest, it is very hard to offend me. It really is. It's kind of funny because it used to not be, right? And maybe that's part of it. As I came from teenage years of easily being offended, where I was like, there is right and wrong, and there's this and there's that, and and I was fiery. Like, I would let you know my opinion if it was different than yours. And so I think coming from that, it's almost like going to the other extreme, mm-hmm. where I'm like, you know what? I do still have definite opinions. You can talk to anybody I know. They know I do. But I respect that other people do as well, uh-huh. and that they have their opinions too. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that's valuable. And so it really is it's empathy, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Mm-hmm. And when you do that enough times, that is how it's hard to offend me. It really is, because I just get that they're coming from somewhere else.
Right.
And I seriously, what do I physically do in the moment? I breathe. It's such a big deal to just take a deep breath. There actually is a whole lot of science behind what that does for your brain as well. It's not just the moment to catch yourself. So literally, I breathe. When I'm like confronted with somebody who's offensive, I stop and I take my deep breath. And I have also learned that keeping my mouth shut is oftentimes a smarter thing, and it isn't weakness. It's actually strength. Weakness is when you fire off. Right. Strength is actually holding your tongue until you know the right time. People aren't going to listen to you when you're yelling anyways. Mm-hmm. I mean, you raise your voice or you're confrontational, the other person's not going to learn anyways. So if you are trying to teach them something, that's pointless. To do it that way is not effective. It just isn't. And I just know that enough that I'm like, I'll just let them go. Let them go, because it's right now talking back to them isn't going to accomplish what I want anyways. Mm-hmm. And so if I look at what I want to accomplish, now's not the time anyways.
So yeah, because if they're angry or whatever, they're right. They were trying to prove their point. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be able to hear whatever I have to say.
Absolutely.
Because they have to believe where they're at right now.
Yeah, and they just have literally the science of it. You've got your endorphins going. You are in fight and fight. You're fighting. Yeah. So you're not going to hear. And so it actually isn't worth keeping that. You need to de-escalate to be able to talk to somebody. If the
So-
situation had escalated, neither one of you are hearing the other person anyways.
Right. So if you're okay, so just let's say for whatever reason in your life something's going on and you're frustrated, you're upset, and you feel like you are the one making that point. How do you recognize when you're that person for yourself? I mean, do you just kind of get in, and sometimes I'm sure things still kind of escalate, right?
Right.
In your life. So how do you stop that dynamic? I mean, do you stop midstream and then regroup and then go away? I need to breathe. Like, do you see where I'm going? I want to understand your process.
I do. Well, a little bit of my process, truthfully, this is where I talk about my narcolepsy being a strength. I can't get too heated because my narcolepsy kicks in. So I will literally feel that this is where it's a bonus for me having it, is that when I start to feel my eyes starting to droop, or I feel like my neck is kind of relaxing, I know I'm getting too heated in my head. It's like my body's telling me, and I know I have to stop or I will collapse. That is the fun of narcolepsy. So it's kind of an interesting thing. It's a cue for me. Other people don't see it, but I know inside that I'm getting too emotional. And when I get emotional like that, I'm totally not effective because I look just bizarre trying to explain to somebody something when I can't even keep my head up, right? And so for me, I have to stop and cool down and walk away. Narcolepsy, I take a nap. A nap is a beautiful thing to me. I call it my superpower. Most people, it takes on average 90 minutes to get to deep sleep. Last time I was tested, I did it in 90 seconds. So when I go to sleep, I have my power naps really can be 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and I've hit deep sleep, and I actually physically am refreshed.
Wow.
And when your brain is a beautiful thing. Brains are amazing. They are designed to take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. Sleep is one of the times when they do that. So if you can calm down and get your body and let your body hit deep sleep, your brain actually sorts through all the stuff it's registering, gets rid of trash, does other things, realigns your chemicals, really fabulous. Right. So I really do believe if you can step away and just breathe, take a nap, meditation is priceless, and just breathe. Your body knows what to do to help give you the strength that you need if you let it. We're designed pretty well. We're designed amazingly well. And that's part of that too. So I have my narcolepsy, which is ridiculously frustrating at times, is actually a huge blessing because I have to calm down. Mm-hmm. So
that sounds like a superpower to me because it's almost like you have an early warning system that other people don't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in a lot of ways I do.
And I'm trying to figure out, even inside of myself right now, how do I recognize when I'm starting to feel heated? I mean, I know for me what it is, right? Maybe I start sweating, maybe my tummy gets a little bit upset, or I feel my heart pounding. And even in those moments, though, it's like you're forced to walk away, and I have to force myself to walk away, right? Like you don't get much of a choice because you'll just not really go to sleep, right? But
yeah, go to whatever. It's not really sleep. I don't even know what to call it. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. Yeah, I guess my body, I do have that as a benefit. It's one of those things where at the beginning when I said talking about a struggle versus a strength, and how sometimes things are your struggle actually become your strength. And I really believe that, being that being that kid in high school, that horrible kid. I have helped so many parents who have that kid because I get that kid.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, okay, I know where they're at. I know what they're thinking.
Yeah.
You know, I get where they're coming from. You know, so it's taking those things that were your struggles and now, you know, they're your strengths. I mean, you never give up on your kid. You just don't. That's just not, you don't, because you have no idea what's going on in that kid's head. I remember one night specifically, I had a friend who apparently called my parents and would tell them where I was because he was worried about me. I didn't know this till I was an adult. Okay, my parents told me, and I was like, "You're kidding me!" I was wondering how they always knew where I was. And this one friend of mine would like tell them, and that friend is priceless to me now. At the time, I would have lost it on him had I found out he was doing that. But now, oh my gosh, I'm so thankful for him, and I've told him so. Found him as an adult and made sure he understood that how much I appreciated that. And so the one night in particular, I was someplace I didn't want to be, and I didn't know how to get out of it. I was like stuck there because I was with somebody else in their car, right? And I was like, I don't want to be here. And here my parents pull up in the big family van. You know, you can't miss it. It's like every teenager's nightmare. Here your parents show up, and you know, and they're like, Alicia, you know, get in the car. And so I acted all grumpy, like, I can't believe you're here. Blah, blah. Oh my gosh, I was so relieved. I got into that van and was like, thank goodness my parents came. My parents, what did they get to hear? Oh, that's not what they heard. They heard me being like, I can't believe you are here. I cannot believe you came into it. No. But inside, I was so relieved. And I actually believe that happens more times than we know. Where the kid is showing, like, they're like so mad at you, you don't know if they really are. I was not going to let my parents know how thrilled I was that they came, because that would be admitting I was not as tough as I think I am, right?
Right.
But I was so relieved. I told my mom about that night, and it was interesting. You know, it was probably in my 30s when we had this conversation, and she started to cry, and I was like, and I felt bad, but then she's like, that night, she's like, was a big night for her because she was done. She was done. She was like, I was done. I had come and dealt with you, and here my friend had called her up and told her I was, and she had looked at my dad and she said, I don't want to go get her. I'm done. I'm worn out. And my dad just goes, you don't give up on your kids, and got up and went and got in the car. And she's like, and your dad just started the car and was sitting in there waiting for me. She's like, so I got up and went, you know, and you just don't know.
You never do. No. I think that is a really great point. I mean, as teenagers, you know, when I was a teenager, I don't know what it is about being a teenager. I could not let my mom know when I needed help.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything, she paid a price for it.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a mom now, I look back at that and I have to remember I'm going to pay that price, for crying out loud, that I don't want to pay. And that's okay. That's part of being a parent. I think it teaches me who I am as a parent. It teaches as a person, as a human.
As a human, yep.
As a human, period. You know, this human experience is so hard and scary and frustrating and joyous and sad,
yeah,
and exciting
and magical. Yeah. You know, and I think that, you know, you were asking earlier about how I deal with when I'm getting heated or when I have somebody who's not confrontational. And this is, again, a conscious effort you have to do. At that moment, I will honestly look for anything that makes me smile. And smile inside, because if you smile at the person, you're just it's rude, right? They're upset and you smile at them, and that's just going to escalate everything. But I really do. I look for like something small, and like, even aside from the situation, like if for example, I love being outside. I love the sky.
Right.
If I am frustrated with somebody and let's say the confrontation's going on outside, I literally look up at the sky and just notice how amazing it is. And I force myself to stop and notice something around me that's amazing because I need that reality check.
So it doesn't matter where you're at. If you're
doesn't matter where you're at,
outside, just find one thing that
something
that you can be grateful for.
Yeah, something that even, you know, I don't know if grateful for sounds maybe more deep than I'm even going. Just something that just for a split second makes you smile. Even, you know, that makes you feel more positive. Later on, you can be grateful for it because you've thought about it. But at the moment, it's like, let me just acknowledge something that's okay. You know, something that's positive.
So
something
not really
that
a thing, or
it can be a thing, or it can just be in general, like a feeling, or somebody, you know, this one person's chewing on you, but that person over there is going to be that strength. Little kids are priceless to go to for that. Right. You know, because if you've got an adult frustrating you, but there's some kid on the floor doing something funny, that's what you look at. Because you're like, I need to find something in the moment to redirect and reality check, remind myself that it's not all about this heated moment. There's a way bigger picture. And
so it's
literally kind of like looking for something to reality check me.
Right. So I think, so I'm in this heated conversation, I'm frustrated, and my emotions are hot, right? Mm-hmm. So then I think what I hear you saying is just find something in that moment, nothing that has to do with the emotion, and everything that has to do with being present.
Yes.
Is that kind of?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Literally, now this is going to sound a little silly, but there was one lady in the store and she was going off on her kids. And I was having a really hard time with that because the way she was talking to her kids and the way she was treating them. And we were stuck in a little aisle.
Okay.
You know, and those little aisles at the checkout stands, it's amazing the dynamics that happen there. And so you're stuck. There's no way to get away from it. And literally, one of the kids was completely ignoring her and was like playing with some little fidgety thing that they had picked off the shelf. And it was such a priceless little moment. If all that other garbage hadn't been there, this little moment of this kid really investigating whatever he had picked up was really a cool thing. So I was just like, I'm going to focus on this little kid who is having this really cool moment so that I can remember the world is amazing. Because he was like discovering what he was looking at. It was really fun to watch.
Yeah.
And so you focus on that instead of the hot mess that his mom was at the moment. Plus, I don't know what led up to that. You know, who knows? The one kid was screaming and throwing a fit. That poor mom was trying to juggle multiple kids. You don't know. Yeah. You don't know what she's going through. You don't know what she was taught. You don't know what background she came from. We all are taught different things, and you just have to reality check. But instead of getting frustrated, I was like, that little kid's awesome. This little discovery thing he's doing down there when he's like checking out. I can't remember what it was. There was some little toy thing, you know, in the aisle.
Yeah.
And he was so cool how he was investigating it that I just focused on him.
So the
kind of reality check me.
Right. And mom's emotions were causing you stress in that moment. It sounds like maybe you were starting to feel the heart racing thing or whatever your symptoms, right? And you're going, okay, if I don't find a way to focus on something else, I'm just going to be infuriated, which is going to cause this, which is going to trigger the narcolepsy. Am I on the right path there? Or?
I don't know that I thought that much, but ultimately that would be the process. But now it's so natural that I don't think that much about it.
So how did you get to a point where it went from, because, you know, we went from teenage years to now, but that transition, do you remember what it was like to make that transition to now, where it maybe trying those new skills was hard? And what was that like?
You know, I remember very well that process because that process unfortunately involves a crash, and when you hit rock bottom, you're like, I need something else, right? I was in college and CU in Boulder, which is a party school and is known for that. And my roommates were total partiers, and I didn't want to be there, and I just knew it, and I wasn't happy. And I remember one night I sat there looking in front of a mirror. I remember it very well. And I just sat there and was like trying to scientifically approach how to remember when I was last happy. This was my mindset. And so like really genuinely happy, like you didn't care about anything. I mean, I had fun. I had things like that. That's not what I'm talking about. And so some reason, and I don't know why I came up that it was when I was 12. And I don't know how come I came up with that, but I was 12 in my mind. I started thinking about all the things that I had then that I didn't have now and things like that. And this is where having incredible parents was priceless. My relationship with my parents at this time was not good, right? I only called them when I needed something. How many of us know kids that are like that, right? I think that's actually quite normal, but it was rough. But I called my parents up. They lived in a suburb of Denver, so they were about, an hour or something drive from me. And I just said, can you come pick me up this weekend? Can I just come home this weekend? And what I love about my parents is they did. No questions asked. I mean, that's amazing. For all the grief that I had put them through, my mom shows up and just to pick me up. No questions asked. Got in the car and went home for the weekend. And I started doing that almost every weekend for a little over a month. And then I just told my parents, I'm like, can I move home? Because I just knew I wasn't where I wanted, and just had to reality check my life in general. And what I love though that my parents did is that they said, yeah, you can come home, but we have rules. And I love them for doing that instead of just being like, yeah, come home, whatever. And I think sometimes parents are so excited that their kid has come home that they don't set some boundaries. And I think the kid needs boundaries. I wanted that. And they said, your sibling, I was the third, there were still kids at home. And they were like, they're still here. We have our rules. You need to follow them. This is what we do in our house. You need to do that. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. And then just a whole line of wonderful people from my past stepped back in, and adults that I had a lot of respect for who had no idea what I had been going through in my life or anything. And I didn't want to disappoint them. And so I was like, yeah, I'm great. But it ended up helping me be great because they didn't realize I was struggling. And so they would just ask me to do something. And I'd be like, okay, I'll do that. So it gets into my church and into my faith. One of the rules that my parents set was, we go to church on Sunday, so you are too. And I was like, all right. They're like, we don't care if, whatever you do there is up to you, but you need to go and be the example in our family. This is what we do on Sundays. And it's what we'd always done. So I went, and that very first Sunday, one of my youth leaders came up to me with this girl who was my age and said, she's from Sweden. She's nannying here. Can you help her get used to the U.S.? And I was like, and I didn't want my old leader to know that I was a hot mess. So I was like, sure, So, I mean, it was a great experience because then I got to, and this is where things started to change. I got to show this girl from Sweden how great things were in the U.S., right? And when your task is to show positive things, you become positive because you're looking for positive things. And I realized there's actually a lot of really amazing things. Plus, it was fun to watch her think everything was amazing.
Right.
And things that you had taken for granted, she thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
And so that was part of the change in things.
I'm just thinking how you were a hot mess and you didn't want people to know you were a hot mess.
No,
And it took them, regardless, whether you were a hot mess or not, of saying, I need you.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost sounds like because there were other people that saw value in you and gave you things that you could do, that then you were able eventually, maybe not right away, it didn't sound like it, but it took some time before you were able to go, oh, there's something in here worth sharing.
Absolutely. Yep. I am a big believer that people need to feel needed. And when you realize that you're needed and that you have something unique to bring to the picture, that's priceless.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody is needed, and everybody does have something unique to bring to the picture. And I think that's part of why it takes a lot to offend me, or it takes a lot to frustrate me, is because I really do believe everybody is absolutely needed. And that means everybody who is different than me, right? It would be an incredibly boring and unnecessary world if we were all the same.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to have different opinions. We're supposed to think differently. That's necessary, and we're all needed. And we all have a different perspective that's necessary.
Yeah, it sounds like with that different perspective that's necessary, and I hear a lot of difference, needing those differences, and yet I also hear you saying we're so similar.
Right.
And to me, that's a very complex world, which means that
it is and it isn't. It's really simple at the same time. Mm-hmm. What us being so similar is based off of our more of our core, mm-hmm. Our emotions, who we are deeper. That mm-hmm. is similar. Mm-hmm. What is so different about us has been our life experiences, mm-hmm. that have caused those feelings, and those are so necessary to create it. So it really isn't as complex. Our core is very similar.
Right.
What we've experienced is very different. And that's what's needed, because we need to help I'm always amazed when I talk about different things that, people find out different things about me, how all of a sudden somebody's like, oh, wait, I had this experience, and everybody has something that's very, very similar to you. I work with seniors with various different health concerns, and dementia being one of them. And almost almost everybody, when they find out that's what they do, they have somebody who is going through that experience, the experience of aging or dementia, and they really want to talk to me about it. And so that's what I mean, where we're actually even our experiences aren't necessarily so different when we look at them that way.
Right.
There's a lot more relatable. We're a lot more relatable than we think. And when you're willing to actually let somebody know that about you, and that's mm-hmm. perhaps the hard part, because we're really good at walls, that is when those real connections are made, where that deeper core of you connects to their deeper core, because you have a connection to experiences. So those bring you together so that your cores can actually connect. And so it's interesting. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think what I hear you saying is that I don't want to use the core of who we are as humans is very similar. Mm-hmm. Maybe the experiences themselves are not similar. The emotions around those are similar.
Yes. But I also believe some of us have very similar experiences. And when you can connect with somebody who has, that's when you're able to help. And that's when you're able to connect with each other, and both of you help each other work with what you're going through. And now those are great moments when those happen.
So it sounds to me like being vulnerable is really important to get to that step, though, to show the core of who I am, I have to be a little bit vulnerable.
You do. You do.
And maybe I don't need to wait for the other person to be vulnerable first.
Yeah. I'm not saying go out there and be the bizarre person who dumps their whole life out on Facebook. You know, that's not necessarily what I'm promoting here. But within a safe environment, you do that. And I think one of the key things is to create those safe environments for other people is how you do that.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, I swear, it's amazing. We will be anywhere. And by the time we're leaving, everybody there who we don't know has told them her life story. I'm like, Mom, how does this happen? Like, we're in the checkout lines, and by the time we get to the checkout line, she's like, it's like they're old friends. Like, her and the person in front of them, they'd never met. And I was like, Mom, and she really has this great, and like, I just watch and I'm like, how is this happening? And so I've actually really have analyzed what it is. And this is what I believe it comes down to. My mother believes very firmly that whoever you are talking to deserves 100% of your attention. And so when she is in that checkout line, she actually, whoever is talking to her has her full attention. And I believe when people feel that you are genuinely interested in who they are, they share who they are.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that you have to be vulnerable as much as you allow them to feel safe with them being vulnerable. And all you do, and it's very simple, all you do is, direct eye contact. Yeah. You smile. A smile is priceless. A smile is such a big deal. My mom, when I went away to college, her one advice was smile at people. And I was like, that is the dumbest advice in the world. I'm like, this is your big moment. You're sending off farewell. But I did it, and absolutely priceless. I made friends in the dorms. I did all that because I smiled. That's simple. It's amazing how much a smile can make someone's day better. Yeah. And I think the other thing, too, is to not go in expecting something out of it. If you go in expecting, I know that there are tons of people who have made my day better who have no idea they ever did.
Ooh, isn't that the truth?
Yeah. And that is okay. And so go smile at people and don't expect to ever know the result.
Yeah.
That's okay. You don't have to know the result. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
If that's why you're smiling is because you want to see someone be happier, check yourself. That's not the point. You're not going to always see the effect. Just smile, listen. My mom gives them her attention. That's why they share.
Yeah.
And she doesn't ask questions. She really doesn't. She doesn't even ask them questions. They just start talking. Yeah. And I think it's because how wonderful is it to feel like somebody actually cares that you exist. And it's as simple as looking at somebody in the eyes. As simple as using the name. She uses the name of the checkers. And she doesn't do it in the weird way. She'll be like, thank you, Chris, for doing that. And he's like, what? And they'll look up because they heard their name. Yeah. It's little things like that. And, and my mom was not always that way. Okay, I remember growing up with a very stressed out mom. I asked her one time what happened. And she still worries about us as kids and stuff. But my mom genuinely is a very positive person. And I asked her about it because she wasn't that way when I was growing up. And she said one day, she just woke up and was worried about this and that. And she said she was exhausted. She was done. She's like, I am so tired of being tired. Right. And so she said she just made a choice that day that she wasn't going to be stressed out and she wasn't going to be negative. And she said it wasn't easy. She said, but the times those thoughts would pop in her head, she had a little like mantra, so to speak, or a little saying to say in her mind that was positive so that she wouldn't be negative. And then it just became who she is.
Wow.
So that is what I've tried to do. When I learned that that's what she did, I'm like, okay, I cannot always choose what happens to me, right?
True.
But I believe I can choose how I react.
Yeah.
That is my thing I can control.
Yeah. So kind of like respond instead of react.
Yeah, well, yeah. And that's the thing. I can't decide what happens to me, but I can decide what I do about it.
Yeah.
And that is my choice.
Yeah.
And I would much rather choose to be positive than negative, because it's exhausting to be negative. I've done it. I can tell you that it's exhausting for me physically. It crashed me. But it is exhausting to be angry and to carry hatred. It sucks the life out of you. What's the point? And you're only letting that person succeed. There's the reality. If you're angry at somebody, guess what? They are not probably sitting at their house worrying about you. So the only person actually being affected is you. You are actually letting them win by being angry at them.
Yeah. Well,
what's the point
because
of that?
it's changing your.
Yeah, it's screwing up you.
It's screwing up me, not anybody else. If I'm mad,
I guarantee you, they are not sitting at their house thinking about you and being mad at you. You're the only one that's doing that, probably. And it's letting them win in that sense too. Yeah. You're actually, what's the point of that? It's only affecting you. I don't see a point of it.
Mm-mm.
It's exhausting. It's exhausting to be angry.
It is.
You don't have to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean what they did is suddenly okay.
Right.
But you don't have to hang on to it.
Mm-mm.
You hanging on to it lets what they did have more power than the actual action.
Isn't that the truth?
Yep.
Yeah. I can't remember where I learned it, but forgiveness is for me, reconciliation is for them. So it's, if I can let go in my heart, then there's a possibility if they want to reconcile or we need to work through something, then we can. But if I'm holding on to something, that's never going to happen anyway.
Never going to happen.
Never.
And it's only going to poison you.
Yeah. Okay. So 3 things you want to make sure the audience knows, or tools that you want to give them.
Okay. I really think that not just teenagers, but teenagers and people in general need to be given more credit than we're probably giving them. Their emotions are very real. What's causing them may seem absurd to you. That doesn't matter. It's not absurd to them. So you treat it with the respect you would want your emotions treated with.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of them. Second one, don't ever give up on your kid.
Yeah.
And that's the kid. Don't ever give up on anyone.
Yeah.
Because you don't know.
Mm-mm.
Third one, what you think are your weaknesses or your problems end up being strengths if you look at them through the right lenses. If you bother to look at them the right way. I had never thought when you said, so your body has a natural way to, like, a gift that you have from your narcolepsy, a natural way to warn yourself that you're getting heated that we don't get. I was like, I've never thought of that. I never thought of it as like this great system to let me know in advance something's up. I never thought of that. So yeah, the things that you may look at as your struggle or your weakness, very much so can become your strength if you bother to do that. If you bother to look at it that way and to figure that out and take the time to figure out what that means.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that I got to have you here today and that you were able to share such deep and important messages with us. I really appreciate it.
I really hope that it is helpful to somebody. That's the thing. If it helps, and I really sincerely mean this, if it helps one person figure out one thing in their life, worth it.
Totally.
That's really legitimately worth it. Small things matter.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Relatively Damaged by Damaged Parents. We really enjoyed talking to Alicia about how her narcolepsy is a sign that her emotions are taking over. We especially liked when she described her love for all humans. To unite with other damaged people, connect with us on Facebook. Look for Damaged Parents. This podcast was sponsored in part by Arches Audio. We'll be here next week, still relatively damaged. See you then!